Hello, I am Greg Weinger, here with the Powerful Introvert podcast. Today, I'm here with Chris Dyer. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I'm really excited to have you on here today. You have a very impressive CV, many times CEO, multiple times. You're a featured speaker, keynote speaker. Your companies have been the best places to work, voted multiple times. Inc. fastest growing company multiple times. But the question I really have for you is, where did you get such fantastic taste in eyeglasses?
Well, the funny story is I got eye surgery a few years ago, and they didn't tell me that that was going to cause me to need readers. Right around the same time my grandson was born, and I remember my grandfather always had these big, giant glasses. And so I joked around and got some really big, giant glasses. And that sort of evolved into, I noticed like people really were paying attention to that. They thought it was interesting or funny. And so I just kept playing around with different glasses and different colors. And I have this one in orange that people absolutely hated. I mean, the visceral reaction of this orange glasses. And so I tried the white and it had the opposite. People loved them. And I'm like, okay, that's it. White glasses, I'm done. So that's the new brand.
That's smart. It's definitely an iconic look, and in my mind, these are kind of extroverted glasses, and I focus on that topic a bit. So it brings up the question: do you consider yourself a introvert, extrovert, or somewhere in between?
I am a card-carrying extrovert. That is for sure.
That checks out. It's awesome. I mean, it's definitely useful, personality trait for a CEO. But that you are inspiring me to pick out some more extroverted glasses. One of the things I want to get into, and we'll build up to it, is I'm interested in supporting aspiring leaders who happen to be quieter or maybe naturally introverted, but just they want to go out and have a bigger impact. And one of the things I recognized is a lot of times company cultures don't support individuals who have leadership potential but don't necessarily fit that extroverted mold. So I'm super interested in your work in creating great dynamic company cultures, and what I want to get to a little bit is, how do you change cultures, and how do you make them great and supportive for everyone, because the intention is to get the best out of everybody in your company.
Yeah.
Maybe we start with the problem. What is wrong with company cultures today?
Yeah. Probably the easiest way to say this is that you can't just speak a culture into existence. You can't just say it, right? It has to be created. It has to be really intentionally figured out. And that comes from a really deep sense and a deep understanding of, I think, as a CEO or the owner of the business, like who you are, what you really want for your organization, how you see it operating. And very few people have that understanding. And so what they end up with is some cockamamie version of like something they had before in a different company and something they read in a book. And then the inmates are running the asylum essentially, as half of it. And that just doesn't work. So being super intentional is probably the most important thing at the beginning. And then of course I have some things that we've studied and worked on that I think are the pillars to greatness. But if you at least want to be good, it's got to be super intentional about what you want.
And this matches my experience, is that the company culture starts with the CEO, the founders, the founding team, and they set that tone. And it can be modified to an extent, but just an outsized CEO has an outsized impact on that. Is it that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, if you don't have that, what are the downfalls? Like, what are the impacts?
Well, let's just flip it, right? So what do we see out of the greatest cultures? We see
Yeah.
higher profits, higher performance, higher productivity. So the weaker your culture is, the harder time you're going to have getting to those goals around productivity, performance, and profits, which is really the three things that I consistently hear that CEOs care about. I mean, they care about a lot of things, but whether it's their personal preference or personal goals or the board or their investors or whatever, I mean, those are the three things that they think about all the time. And what blows my mind is that they spend so much time on all these other things besides how to make work not suck for their people. I mean, creating that good culture is that gateway right into having those things be better.
So let's continue with that. What are these hallmarks of a great company culture?
Sure. So there's 7 pillars. Again, to kind of take one step back, if you want to at least be good, you got to be intentional. You got to have your mission statement. You got to know your values. You got to like have goals, and there's certain things you need to at least be doing. But if you want to be great, then you have to be really, really good at transparency, positive leadership, knowing how to leverage mistakes, celebrating uniqueness, listening, recognition. Those are all the 7 pillars that you have to be really, really good at. Now, most companies might say, oh, well, we're pretty good at recognition. We've got a little program. We do something over there. And you're like, yeah, but, does anybody know anything about why decisions are made? Does anybody know what the goals are? Does anybody have any transparency into what is really happening with the company? Right? It's great to pat people on the back, but if nobody knows how anything is done or why decisions are being made, you're going to really struggle. So all 7 are super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely seen a number of those. Tell me more about celebrating uniqueness.
Yeah, so uniqueness shows up in a lot of different ways. The obvious one is, how do we celebrate what makes each employee unique? This is where we make sure that we don't end up with like 19 people of the exact same background and look the same, act the same, talk the same, went all to the same school. Like there's that part. There's also the like, how do we celebrate that this person is wildly effective and they're a really good boss, even though to your point, they're not an extrovert, right? But they're a really effective person. Like, how do we recognize those things about people, about what their strengths are, about what makes them tick, what makes them special, not what makes them the same as everybody else, right? So I'm in Orange County. If I only wanted to hire people who I thought were Anaheim or Los Angeles Angels fans, I get a pretty slim group of people. And that's a pretty silly way to think about hiring. But honestly, like I've seen managers that hire people based on if they have similar likes and hobbies as the manager. And that's like, are you kidding me? Like, why don't you want the best person to come and do the best job? Uniqueness also shows up in, can marketing, can sales really articulate what makes the product unique, what makes the company unique? Can we really talk about that as a story? Are the managers and the leadership talking about what makes the organization unique and why that is a good place for the employees that they've hired to work? So we're constantly focusing on this, trying to stand out, that needle in a haystack in all these different moments, from client facing to vendor facing to employee facing. We really have to get that messaging right, and we have to get that approach right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the concept kind of applies both to, in using another word, diversity, or including different, recognizing different voices, recognizing that makes you stronger, and you have more diversity of opinion that to get to better results. And then the other part is, what is your unique competitive advantage? What makes you stand out as a company and as a product in the market? Yeah, yeah, that's cool. And then have you been in situations where, you're not able to start fresh with a company culture, but you actually have to go in and actively change something that's existing? And how do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do this quite often where companies or leadership is struggling and they want to get from, A to Z, and they'll bring me in to help. And very often they are overly worried about the larger processes and larger things. And really, culture is quite simple, at least from my perspective. I think human beings are complex. And what we have to do is be able to serve up to them, this is how we operate. These are the guardrails. These are the rules. I mean, really spending that time to create that environment where we sort of show them very clearly where they can exist and where they can operate, and where they can't. I'm not saying that the rules are the same for every company. I mean, I've worked with companies where those boundaries move around quite a bit. That's up to the organization itself. But creating those sort of, okay, we're not going to go past this line. If you do, like, you can't work here. Like, that's not, we're not that kind of company. I've been in organizations where they're super cutthroat, super competitive. I mean, they would, some companies or people would be appalled to be in that culture, but like that works really, really well, and people want to be in that, and it's high growth and it's high pressure, and like when you come over here, and I've been in other cultures where it's kumbaya and they're all holding hands and singing a song every morning, and it's like totally different environment, but the idea is still the same thing. So we create that place, and then after that, we've got to get people on board with that, and that comes from having conversations and including them and getting them to think about what does a great workplace look like for them, what does a great team look like for them, what does a great boss look like for them. And the answers are what we would expect, but there's some magic in them telling us that, and us listening. What's one of the pillars? Us listening to what they think and being able to then put some of those things in action, and for them to feel like they were a part of that creation. I don't know if you ever saw the movie, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You may have read the book, but like in the movie, they screwed up and they're going to recreate Earth, and so they're literally like deciding what's going to happen. And it's a little bit like that, of like, we kind of already know what needs to happen, but if you can bring some of the employees along and say, well, should there be a river here? Should there be a tree there? And they kind of feel like they're a part of that. There's real magic in that. And I think the leaders and managers make the mistake of like, well, I already know what's supposed to be here. I already know what the design is, and I'm going to tell everyone what we're supposed to do, instead of letting them be a part of that.
Love that analogy with the recreating, to bring people along when you're recreating the world. What I'm hearing in that, and I've heard this from some other folks, is like, you're not going to change every culture. Every culture is unique, and maybe that's part of that tied into the CEO and the founding teams, that kind of thing. So you have to find a place that's going to be a good fit, because there might be people who just love these cutthroat cultures that may not be a good fit for someone who's on the quieter side.
Yeah, and what I see is when we go in and we're super intentional and we create this together and we can bring people along, that 99.9% of them, they modify their behaviors. They become what we need from them. And that's because they understand now what the rules are. And I'll give you an example of how that works in a second. But like the other ones, they tend to leave on their own. They tend to opt out because they're like, oh, I can't yell and scream and get my way anymore. Or like, I can't manipulate the whole situation because now there's transparency. Now there's clarity about how we make decisions. And I can't come in here and weasel my way in and do what I want to do. Like, that kind of toxic person's like, I'm going to go find somewhere else to go be toxic. That's not how they see it, but essentially that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Think about like a birthday party. A birthday party is the most popular party that you'll ever go to. And that's not because we care about someone's birthday. It's actually because there's very defined rules about what happens, when you show up, when is appropriate time to go, how you're supposed to act, what you're supposed to bring, what you're supposed to do. Go to almost any birthday party and you're going to know exactly what you're supposed to do. Show up on time, bring a present, stay around until someone sings and the candles, right? Like you know the rules. And that's why people come to birthday parties. If you come to just like a barbecue, like those aren't as popular. And why is it? Because where am I supposed to go? Am I going to leave? Am I supposed to dress up? I'll be swimming. Am I not? Like suddenly people have filled with anxiety of all of these things that they don't know what's going to happen and who's going to be there and what's the point of the party. And like, and so you have less participation. When we help our employees understand how things are going to go and how they're going to operate and how we see it happening, like the birthday party example, they suddenly reduce their anxiety, they reduce their friction. They don't worry about that stuff so much, and they're instead worrying about how to get their job done the right way.
Yeah, you're reminding me, I think that white elephant parties are probably popular for a similar reason, because there's a set of rules there. So just in terms of that, so you're kind of describing norms, company norms as well there. So there's the transparency, the clarity about why am I here, what's our purpose, and people are brought along and being listened to. But then you're also creating comfort for them by creating a predictable environment where, this is how we operate here. And so what are some effective practices for making effective meetings, or anything else that comes to mind?
Well, if you're running around all day having first meetings all day long, you're doing it wrong. If you're having the same meeting over and over and over again, you're doing it wrong. So what I mean by that is, like, all of your meetings are 30-minute Teams or Zoom meetings. If all of your meetings are an hour, like that, it's insanity. Because there's something called Parkinson's law, which says if you set an amount of time to do something, you will fill up that space. Really, you and I have an hour for this podcast. It's probably going to be an hour because we've said an hour, and we'll probably find some way to talk enough so that we fill that hour no matter what. Even if, like, at 30 minutes we feel like we're done, we'll find some way. Our brains will, like, stretch it because we had an hour. And so we're doing that all the time. Leaders set these meetings when maybe they don't need a 30-minute meeting, but now they have put that in place. And so other things pop in, they spend longer, they don't move as quickly or as effectively. And so, I have leaders tell me all the time, like, I spend all day on meetings and then I have to go home and do my work. That's insanity. So we invented a bunch of different meeting types to really help people. And I'll say this, if anybody is interested in a little PDF guide and has all these broken down on how to do it, you're welcome to text 33777 and put my name, Chris, as the message, and then it'll prompt you with instructions, and we'll send you out a little PDF that has all these in them. But
That's awesome.
so the first one is a cockroach meeting. Imagine you have a cockroach in your bathroom. It's a small problem. You may not want to be the one who cleans it up. That's okay. But it's a small problem. We allowed anybody to call a cockroach meeting, and they could invite anybody they wanted. 5 to 7 people was the max. It is a 15-minute meeting or less. We always start on time. So if you're late, you got to sing. And we always try to end early. So we're trying to bump up against that Parkinson's law. Our goal is to not be here for 15 minutes. That is our number 2 goal. Number 1 is to start on time, and number 2 is to not actually go 15 minutes. And people are really empowered because they could call a meeting and get their problem solved. They didn't have to wait for their team, they had to wait for their boss. They didn't have to wait for Tom and IT to tell them what they're supposed to do. They can say, hey, our client just called and said they need this thing. I have no idea what to do. And then, like, can anyone help me in 15 minutes? And like 3, 5, 7 people show up. Some of them know the answer. Some of them want to know the answer. Some of them are just bored or whatever. Like, they all hop on and they find out. We had, like, I don't know, something like 60 cockroach meetings happening a day when we were measuring it. And they were an average of 7.5 minutes. So imagine an employee in 7.5 minutes is getting their problem solved, is not spending hours calling people all around the organization, watching YouTube videos, researching on Google, trying to figure it out themselves. And instead, in 7 minutes, they got unstuck. This is also kind of a really great tool if you're hybrid or remote, because, sometimes we could have gotten that unstuck by just walking down the hall and asking people pretty quickly. We might have used that strategy. That meeting right there, if you did none of my other meetings, if you just did that one, you implemented that, you'll notice that people feel so empowered. It shocks me how many organizations, like, there's such a hierarchy. You can't even call a meeting unless, like, your boss approves it or whatever. Like, you can't just invite people to a meeting. I mean, like, you're brand new, it's day 2, and you think it's the right idea to invite the CEO to this meeting. You can. But the other rule that I forgot to mention is that it's totally optional to attend. So if you get invited to one and you can't do it, you don't have time, you don't know what they're talking about, and you just decline it, you don't have to go. Totally optional. And these meetings also are wonderful for introverts who don't want to spend all of their energy being social or being, on all the time. And so we noticed this really helped a lot of our introverted employees as well.
That's absolute gold. I mean, so I think the key there, the optionality and just short as possible. I'm going to bookmark Parkinson's law here. Like, this is, I need a crusade because this is something I deal with personally. Is like, how do we change it though? That's really, everyone recognizes a problem, but these are really concrete solutions. So I'm fascinated. What's the next?
So the second one is a
Hmm.
ostrich meeting, which is literally the same meeting. I mean, all of the variables are exactly the same. The difference is we needed the nuance of I need someone to teach me something. I need someone to help me get my head out of the sand. That's why we called it the ostrich meeting. And that could be just, does anyone know how to do a pivot table? Does anyone know how to make this software work? Who can teach me? We had ostrich meetings a lot as well in two other instances. One was very often like I would get called, or one of my senior team would get called in on something like, oh, we're at the last final meeting of this $1 million deal, or this client is super pissed and they now want a senior level person on the call to rectify the problem. And so we would say, well, let's have an ostrich meeting because I got no idea what's happened. I need you all to give me the download of
Hmm.
what's going on. We also use the ostrich meeting I created this policy of if you're wired, you're fired. Meaning, if you go on vacation, you are on vacation. I do not want to see you on email, on text, in the Slack. I don't want to see you're gone. Like you should be gone. If there's an emergency, we promise we will call you. But like 99% of the time, we had to enforce, we wanted people to relax, let go. They were so dedicated and they wanted things to happen. I mean, it was well intentioned, but it was actually burning them out. And so we created this little process that when they came back from vacation, 4 days or more, they had to have an ostrich meeting with their team, and they would pop on for 15 minutes. Their team would tell them what they missed, what's been going on, maybe what emails they should read, what like little client thing is happening or something that is important. But then they had to like share their screen and go in and delete all of their emails from when they were gone.
Oh, nice.
Right. So,
What a beautiful thing. Yeah.
so
How
you're
how
coming
many
back.
hours do you burn doing, catching up for all that time you were out?
Right, and you don't want to go on vacation because it feels like more work than just staying. And so we did that, and we found that people just started taking their vacations. And we also saw that, people weren't burnt out. We saw our, happiness scores continue to go up and up and up. And coincidentally, we saw our NPS scores continue to go up and up and up. So our clients were happier and happier with us because our employees were nicer. They were happier. They weren't miserable people, you know, barking at a client or something. So that's the ostrich meeting. Then we created the tiger team meeting. So a tiger team meeting, again, imagine if there's a tiger in your bathroom. That's a lot bigger problem. And how you're going to operate is very, very different than if you were going to go grab that cockroach and, flush it down the toilet or whatever. So we would need, animal control, a crane, a dart gun, I don't know, some strong people to carry it down the stairs. Like it would be a whole operation to get this tiger out. It's the
Hmm.
same thing. If we have a big problem, we're going to have an hour meeting, 2 hour long meeting, all day meeting. A leader's going to call this. It's going to be mandatory to attend. We're going to have a real assigned agenda. We're going to talk about, people are going to know what they're supposed to do, what they should have researched beforehand, if they're presenting something, because maybe we're about to land the $1 million client. Maybe our business is about to double. Maybe, we're about to lose our largest client. Like whatever this big deal is, that tiger team meeting really sets the tone. And everybody knows they need to step up and show up, and the energy is different. What's hit the fan at that point, right?
Yeah. New big tiger on
Yeah,
the horizon. Yeah. Yeah. One observation so far, each of these meetings, none of these are recurring meetings.
correct. None of them are recurring. They are called based on what is needed. And so we did have team meetings, and the team meeting was up to the team leader to decide how frequent. And so some teams only needed to meet once a week. Some teams met every day. I mean, my customer service team had a daily stand up every day, and that was really important for them. The sales team, they had pretty close to a daily sales meeting. But other departments, operations and research and marketing, like they were once a week or something. We wanted those meetings, and those are important, but we also wanted people to be not stuck waiting for that meeting to happen to get their answers. That just slows down organizations. So you talk about the productivity and the performance component. That's where these meetings come into place, because we're unlocking people's abilities to be able to go and solve their own problems, go faster, get more done. than having to constantly wait inside that internal bureaucracy, right? Of I have to wait for this person to be available to help me.
Well, that's awesome. So, two observations. One, I'm starting to see just from all the things you're describing why your companies were named, some of the best places to work, just how intentional you are, especially with all the vacations, giving employees real vacations, real breaks, real downtime. I mean, that's kind of brilliant. And your observation about that less meeting time is so impactful for introverts because introverts are burning a lot more energy just paying attention to every word everyone is saying. They're deeply processing everything. That's part of like why they get so drained in that. So that's a huge benefit for people like that, which is could be close to half your people. So back on the this question of collaboration, unblocking people, not waiting for that meeting is really key. And of course, we have online digital collaboration tools. So are there practices that you encourage? And there's a whole topic of remote work. Where does a tool like Slack or Teams fit into that?
Yeah. So, and I want to make sure I tell you about Tsunami planning meetings because I think it's really important for
Oh,
our introverts. But I will say we moved 100% of communication internally to Slack,
hmm.
meaning there was no more emails to each other, only emailed externally. And so we found that that really helped centralize communication. That allowed us to help people turn off at night because you can set your Slack to like not alert you. But like everyone installs their emails on their stuff, and it's really hard not to like open your phone and see emails. And somebody else might be working at 9 o'clock at night because that's when they work. And you're getting an email now, you feel pressure that you have to respond. And we wanted to eliminate that. And so we had to train our people and talk about like, we want you to go into Slack and set that time so that if 5 o'clock is when you're done, 5 o'clock, it stops alerting. So when you pop back in the office, then yeah, there's 10 Slack messages I got to get caught up on real quick and no big deal. I just answer when I'm ready.
So having full company participation in, because I've encountered that there's always like the one executive who doesn't Slack, because they're come out of BlackBerry culture or something, like I just only email. And so if everyone's bought in, then everyone is there. And then you could have the equivalent of your Cockroach meeting with a Slack thread. It's like, I know I need these three people. Does one
Yeah.
of you know the answer to this?
Yeah. Or we also had like larger company rooms. So you could go into our water cooler room and say, who knows how to do a pivot table? And like several people would be like, oh, I do. Well, Tom does. Jane does. They get taught, they get shown. Or maybe someone sends them a YouTube link. It says, hey, this what really helped me when I was trying to learn how to do that. Cool. But like everyone is observing this inside that room, even if they're not participating in that moment. And so they're getting upskilled as well. They're getting the education. If you're new to the organization or young and you want to get visibility, you show up to those meetings, even if you already know how to make a pivot table. I mean, you show up, you ask good questions, you super visible, you participate, and that's a great way to get yourself sort of into the company a little bit farther. So the tsunami planning meeting, I wanted to make sure before I forget,
Mm.
we created this meeting for two reasons. One, it was to help spur innovation, but also it was to help curate our meetings for the whole month. So a tsunami planning meeting is a fake meeting. And you might ask, well, why would I call a fake meeting? We're on meetings all month long. But we did a 30-minute meeting with a prompt. And the prompt was something that wasn't real. Like, what would happen if I, as the CEO, was in a coma for 6 months? Or what would happen if we doubled our business? Or what would happen if like website traffic disappeared because AI, took it all? Like whatever these things are that hadn't happened yet. And what we noticed was a few things. People were far more likely to speak up, far more likely to give ideas and to be creative and innovative because it isn't real. It's not a thing that's really existing. No one's going to ask them to like be in charge of this project now just because they spoke up. So there's total freedom. They're just having this like, let's talk about what would happen. Oh, Chris was in a coma for 6 months. Does anyone know how to run payroll? Can anyone else sign the checks? How will we get into the credit cards? Like start thinking about all these things. And actually they would come up with some ideas sometimes that we really needed to actually deal with. Realize like there was no other secondary person on the credit cards. But the most important thing that happened was that we would notice the behaviors of the people participating. And so it was that moment for me as the leader, or each of the leaders, to go, ah, I see that Jason is talking way too much and he keeps interrupting and he's excited and he's just being a big bumbling idiot extrovert, but like he's just like running over the whole meeting. And here I have Greg over here who's not quite talking. And I know Greg's smart and I know Greg should be saying something, but he's not he's not talking and he's not fighting to get his opinion out and he's being too patient. And so as the leader, I need to go have two conversations. I need to go back to Jason and say to him, hey, for this month, can you really make sure that you're giving everyone space to talk? Can you make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to give their opinion before you come back and give your opinion, your second opinion or your third opinion or whatever it is? Like coaching that person to dial it down a little bit and to be more open to hearing other people's thoughts, but also going to you and saying, I need you to speak up. Like we brought you here for a reason. You're an employee here for a reason. I want to hear you. Like I need you to figure out how you can be more confident and speak up for the rest of the month. Like that's your goal. And then we would see that these behaviors would each month, as we did that tsunami, they would start to balance out and they would fix themselves. Or sometimes we would have to really, very rarely, but sometimes deal with somebody who couldn't make the change. But like when you get your meetings right, you get your culture right. And I firmly believe that the culture of that company is constantly living in those meetings. And so when we really set the boundaries there the right way, and we're really curating all the time there, that everything else works. So that one meeting sets the tone for the whole month for that team.
There's a headline right there. If you get the meetings right, you get the cultures right. Just because so much is done in meetings in the course of those meetings, and you're kind of touching on a couple of themes that are really interesting to me. Is one of the things that introverts struggle with is those situations where it's not their natural inclination to speak up, and so having a leader like that recognize them and say, like, you have potential and you can do this, and encouraging them, seeing them, validating that, and also taking steps to make that meeting more manageable for them. Is like that's an ideal situation if you are a quieter aspiring leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else that is a key component for you in fostering strong culture when there's a lot of remote work? There's a lot of companies who are in this situation now. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that can support that?
Sure. So, I mean, all of these meeting types were really originally designed for this sort of hybrid remote work environment to be able to help us collaborate in a lot better way. And they work no matter what the working situation is. But, the more Teams and Zooms and things like that we're on, the more these meetings will certainly be helpful. I guess that's sort of the last thing that we didn't hit on is if you are spending a lot more of that time in the digital world than in their presence, something that leaders need to think about doing is an exercise called bonding. So we had our teams do this no more than once a day. The goal was once a day. Realistically, they probably did it 3 times or 4 times a week. It would only be with your team, the people you work with the most. So you're not going to do this on a meeting with Muhammad in accounting, who you only see one time at the holiday party every year. Like you don't. It's just the people you have the psychological trust with that you work with all the time. This is who you would do this with, and you come to the meeting, and it needs to be at least a 30. Like maybe it might be that stand up, that daily stand up, or it might be something like that. Maybe you're working on a project for a while, and there is going to be a 30-minute meeting that's a project meeting or something. And so what we do is we go around the room and we ask everyone, how are you showing up? Very important that you do not change the words. It's how are you showing up? Not how are you, not how's it going, how are you showing up? And we find this is like the human answer comes back to you about them in their whole life. They might be telling you they're struggling, they're stressed out, they have too many projects. They might also tell you that their spouse is going through chemo treatment and it's been really hard. the more you ask and the more times you do this, the more likely you are to get these deeper, more personal answers. You might find out that like they just got a new puppy and they've been crate training for 3 days, and you're like, ah, that's why Greg is so grumpy. It's not that he doesn't like me, it's that he hasn't slept in 3 days because he's got a brand new puppy. Like, that's key information for me to know in our interactions together. Like, I need to give you grace, and maybe I need to help you out and take on some of your work, or like, how can I help you? But if the team doesn't know that information, they're just going around like filling in the gaps with their own negative conclusions, or like negative things that have happened to them in the past. So like, my boss has been in a bad mood for 2 weeks. Clearly I'm in trouble, or the company's in trouble, and I'm going to get fired because that's what happened last time. Not that, oh, well, my wife has cancer, and like that's why I've been in a bad mood for two weeks, because like things are really bad at home right now, or maybe I'm going through a divorce, or like whatever, right? So we ask that question. It's mandatorily important that if you are the leader or the most senior person in the room, you need to go last. And as a subset to that, if your team is struggling, if they're telling you that there's something wrong, you need to do something about it. So Greg, if we got in the meeting and you said, I just found out that like, one of my best friends from high school just passed away or something, or I don't know, your mom had passed away, something really intense, right? I'm be like, why are you here? Like, please take the day off. Like, please, that's a moment for the leader to come in with the compassion and come in with the like, hey, we will handle your stuff today. We'll handle your stuff this week. Like, whatever the appropriate response is, please go be with your family. Please go deal with that right now. You don't need to be here. We've got this. The meeting is over. Right? We show up for that person in that moment. That means a million times more, and that will keep that person in your company, that great person, with you far more than giving them some cost of living raise. But if they're struggling, nobody cares what you have to say. Nobody cares if you're struggling as the boss. They don't have the capacity to handle your crap on top of their crap. But if they're all doing great, well, then that's the moment for you as their leader to be vulnerable and maybe share what's going on in your life. But they've got to be okay or good to care, or have the capacity is probably the better word, to hear your stuff. And if they're not, then, and you have a problem as the leader, you got to go uphill. You got to go to your boss and complain and cry about your stuff, not to your team. That is a giant mistake that leaders make, is to be constantly complaining and criticizing and talking about their stuff all the time to their team who they're managing, and they just can't do it. It's too much for them. So and then
That's right. You're their support. You're
you're
there
the
to be their support.
right, right. And then at the end of the meeting, we ask, how are you leaving? There's probably like hundreds of examples where I was on a meeting and I thought we came up with the most amazing solution, and I thought everybody was happy, and I thought we really were smart here. And I said, how is everyone leaving? And I'm hearing, I don't know if the client's going to go for this. I don't know if we're ready to launch. I think we should meet again. And I'm like, were we in the same meeting? Like, that was not the energy I was getting at all. But because I stopped to ask, how are you leaving? I got the honest answer of like, I'm a little unsure here, boss. And it's like, oh, okay. So we need to deal with that. We need to have another meeting. We need to talk through that. We need to like come up with solutions, like whatever it is, because otherwise they would have left that meeting, not done what I asked them to do, slow rolled, passive aggressive. I would have been upset. I would have been, why aren't you guys getting this done? Why hasn't this been completed? Because they're like, not ready, but I don't want to tell you that, right? We need to get that stuff out and get everybody on board. That's what we really mean when we say get people on board. We mean we've got to talk through it. We've got to get to that point where they really are okay, or at least if they're not okay, they fully understand why it's got to be this way and why we're going to move forward.
No,
So
that's a really it's happened to me so many times. They're like, feels like everyone's on board, and then day or two passes, and you're like, it starts to come out, and you're like, well, all the objections. That's really smart to try to catch that early.
yeah.
Awesome. So, you've kind of issued a challenge to me here, like not to take up every minute of this podcast. Um, So I do want to ask you, what else can you do to create psychological safety for your team?
Trust is obviously a big one. And so, like, doing what we say and all of that. But I do find that kind of what I talked about with the bonding, where like you show up for people when it matters, is a big one. And another way of thinking about that is that employees want their leaders to be really rigid about the big things, and they want them to be very flexible about the small things. And what most leaders do is they show up and try to like show how strong they are and are really rigid about little things that don't matter, to
Mm.
show that they're competent and that they're, of course. And the moment something big comes up, right? Like your number one salesperson is like sexually harassing people or like telling terrible jokes or like whatever, you suddenly shrink and disappear, right? And you're not willing to step up when it's something really big. And so that, think about your leadership in that, like it's your job to do the hard things. It's not your job to do the little things. And I remember I learned this lesson just very, very specifically. I was at a CEO like meeting, a group of CEOs, and I was kind of complaining about people constantly bringing me these problems. And another CEO, super successful guy, like had sold 9 companies, is a gazillionaire. And he said, one day I realized that it was my job to deal with the big things. Like that's why I'm here. I'm the CEO. And so he said, I decided one day I'm going to start enjoying it, that I'm going to thank them for bringing this to me and I'm going to enjoy solving the big problem. And I was just like, wow, okay. My whole perspective was, oh, another problem. Oh, come on. I was getting upset. But if we want our people to feel safe, we have to step up and do those big, hard things. And then at the same time, give them the freedom and the autonomy to deal with those other things that we don't really need to be dealing with, and to keep pushing back and saying, you decide, you come up with a solution, let me know what you think you want to do. And that's hard to do as a leader, not just to give them the answer, but to keep
Hmm.
redirecting them back to, I trust you. You're a smart person. You know what you're doing. You decide what you think is best. If you really think there's some reason why I need to be involved, like, we're going to break a law or like, something terrible, like, let's talk. But like, you don't need to bring me these little things. I trust you. I believe you. I'm, and that creates such the level of trust there. I think that's what we say, psychological safety, and we say all this stuff and leaders go, yeah, okay, cool. But like, how do I do that?
Yeah,
Right. That's how you do it.
right. Taking care of the big things and letting them do the job, even when they're bringing it to you, say, it's like pushing back. It's like, no, really, I trust you.
Yeah. When I realized this, it took me nearly 2 years to change that behavior in all my employees. I had to keep saying, well, what do you think we should do? And they had gotten conditioned because this was my fault. I would just give them the answer, or I would just tell them what I wanted them to do. And I didn't allow them that freedom to come up with a solution themselves. And I, I had to willingly let them walk out the door, knowing they were going to make the wrong decision sometimes, knowing they were going to cost us some extra money, knowing that they were going to go fall flat on their face, because they came up with the wrong decision. Now, I would save them from anything horrific, right? That would cost us, get us in a lawsuit or something like that. But like, they had to go figure that out themselves, and I had to trust them to figure that out, and then have them come back and tell me, that didn't work. Here's what I learned. Now I'm going to try this. Cool. Go try it and let me know what you think. And that took time, but then that was like that snowball effect. I tell the story in my keynotes that back in 2008, when it was a recession, 2009, I was literally looking for ideas, and I had thousands of employees like staring back at me blankly, like going, just tell us what to do. Because that was the culture. I tell you what to do, you go execute. I'm the smart CEO, and I have all the ideas and I have all the experience, and I'll just tell you what to do. And they were good executors, but they were not good idea people, because I had not fostered that. And so once I had fostered that, what was crazy to me is when COVID hit And we were all, struggling, and it was weird, and business was down, and of course we're all stuck at home and all this stuff. And they called a meeting. I had like 7 people from like 2 different departments asked to have a meeting with me. And I said, okay. And then they presented to me 3 ideas on how they thought we could make money and how we could pivot during COVID. And it was like we had finally reached the peak, right? I didn't even tell them I wanted them to think about ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They had already come up with them. They had already been in that mindset, come up with ideas, done the research, figured this thing out. And then together we figured out which one would be best. And that helped us make millions and millions of dollars extra that we would have never made, and helped us, during that time when our revenue was certainly down from our traditional business.
This is wonderful leadership advice. Chris, I just have to thank you, and conscious of time. There's so much great material we've covered in here. I'm really excited to share this with my audience, and really for myself to try some of these things. I'm going to share your 33777 text to Chris, and get the information about the meetings PDF. Where else can people find out more about you and your work?
I'm on LinkedIn, happy to connect with anybody who wants to connect there. I'm also do a lot of content on TikTok, on Instagram Reels. So if you hang out in those platforms, find me there. Otherwise, my website is chrisdyer.com, and there's lots of content and blogs and things like that. So
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time.
thanks so much for having me, Greg.